Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Phenomenal Views. I am your host, Nick Smith, and now it is November. So, like I did last year, you will probably also be getting some Halloween movie reviews, Halloween in November, but for now, this is Phenomenal Views, and I'm going to be doing reviews on comic book movies that are not Marvel and DC. And I have a very small list, so I'm going to get the first one out of the way, and it's one of my favorites, G.I. Joe. Now, if you all know, I hated the sequel to G.I. Joe. A lot of people give this movie crap, but it's very good. It is very good. It's faithful to the comics. It is faithful to the TV show. This is a faithful adaptation. Now, there are some things that are changed around, but when I get to them, we'll get to them. But this movie starts out with showing us in the older times, like with King and Queens, and there was someone named James McCullen who sold weapons to the good guys and the bad guys. He gets caught and he's branded with a metal mask, and they put this metal mask on him, and then it jumps to the future where we see James McCullen, like another James McCullen, who was played by the same guy who played the Doctor in Doctor Who, and who also played the Dark Elf in Thor: Dark World. So he is playing James McCullen, who is the designer of these warheads, these nanomite warheads that can pretty much eat anything unless you hit the kill switch. So when he's given the demonstration, he is looked on by a certain man who we come to know later on as General Hawk. Now, General Hawk is part of G.I. Joe, and I wish that I had the actors' names who played these characters. Actually, let me get my phone. I actually might be able to do that, because MacU's Wi-Fi is being retarded. MacU's Wi-Fi is retarded. G.I. Joe cast. G.I. Joe cast. Come on. Blah, 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 blah. No. Rise of Cobra cast. Okay. I want the cast, morons. Okay. Alright. Christopher, I forget how you say his last name. He plays McCullen. The guy who plays General Hawk is... Where is he? Come on, where are you? Where the heck... Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid plays General Hawk, and it's so cool because he's looking down, and then all of a sudden we're introduced to Duke, who was played brilliantly by Channing Tatum. Channing Tatum plays this role phenomenal, and then we get the guy who played in Haunted House and the Scary Movies, Marlon Wayans, and he does a great ripcord. Him and Duke are best friends, and they have great chemistry with each other. Their dialogue between each other is awesome. Like, they give the briefcase because the warheads can eat through anything, so they give the briefcase to Duke and his team, and Duke and Ripcord are talking back to each other, and Ripcord is jet specialist. He can fly anything, and he's wanting to be in the Air Force, but Duke wants to be actually in the fight, and he doesn't want to be flying over it. So when they're delivering the warheads, they're attacked by this certain ship, where we see Cobra's men for the first time, and we see a very specific character. Now, a lot of fans, I think this is one of the main reasons people did not like this film, is because what they did with the Baroness. Now, a Baroness is one of Cobra's henchmen, of course, or henchwoman, and she is from France, and she has a French accent, and instead they turned her into a love interest for Duke. I do understand where fans would be really pissed about it, but the fact of the matter is that with this, it comes to a much greater thing later on in the movie. So when she sees Duke for the first time, she kicks him in the head, and then, like, you can tell that these two have history, and it's even some bad history. So then right when Duke's getting ready to get killed, Snake Eyes comes out and he starts fighting everybody. Then all the Joes come out. We get Heavy Duty, we get Scarlet, and we get Breaker, we get all the Joes. And the fight scenes in this movie are awesome. everything in this movie is awesome. The CG is awesome for the mechanics. It just, everything is phenomenal in this film. I mean, yeah, it has some problems, and it's not perfect, but it's just all around a great film. So, when they fail to get the warheads, they retreat, and then we meet General Hawk, and we find out that Duke was actually contacted by General Hawk to join his crusade, but he said no, and Ripcord's like, well, back then he had some issues, and we find out later on what those issues were, and so now they go to the pit from G.I. Joe, and this is like where we see every single G.I. Joe, we see the pit, and it's just awesome. This is an awesome place, and General Hawk's like, look, G.I. Joe doesn't exist, but if they did, it would be the Alpha Dogs. When all else fails, we don't. No one knows the Joes exist except the president. Never mind. So when we get this, General Hawk's basically like, look, your mission is done, give me the warheads, and Duke's like, no, I'm supposed to be delivering these warheads, and then all of a sudden, one thing I love about this film is the way how they do holograms. Like, they have holograms of each other, and like there's times like you actually think that they're there, but they're actually just a hologram. So McCullen's like, all right, I want to see if my warheads are broken, if there's anything broken. And so they're not. He gives him a code to open the case to see if anything's wrong with them. But there's something in the beginning of the film, and I never noticed this, but when Duke's like, look, all my men got taken down, everyone on there died. And then McCullen's like, yeah, but not you. And I was like, wait a minute. That's hinting at something later. And then later on, like when the phone call ends, McCullen's like, 10 years setting this up and this fails. Look, I spent millions of dollars for this. It had to be NATO's fault. And then he looks at a Baroness and he's like, did you hesitate when you saw him? And they are building on something that's going to be happening soon in the film. And there's kind of a relationship between McCullen and a Baroness. And so when her talk is done, all of a sudden we see Storm Shadow for the very first time. Now, my favorite G.I. Joe villain is Storm Shadow because my favorite G.I. Joe is Snake Eyes. I bought 2 action figures when I was a kid. They were my favorite G.I. Joes of all time. So, one thing with Storm Shadow, whenever he's talking or something, he always has these spinning shurikens, and it's just so awesome. And he's like, if you would have sent me, it would have already been done. And McCullen's like, if he touches her again, kill him. So she goes back to France, and this is how they do the whole Baroness thing. Only reason she's called the Baroness is because she married someone in France, or a very rich man. He's known as the Baron, she's known as the Baroness. You know, yeah. Then, when we go to the base, we are introduced to the Doctor, not Mindbender. I actually thought that this guy was Mindbender, but we find out later on that it's not, but Mindbender is in the film. And he's talking about the King Cobra, how it's the Grim Reaper of the jungle, and how they did these soldiers, they pushed these nanomites in their neck. Now, one thing I did not notice until just now, the nanomites, when they're put in your neck, they leave a little print, and it's the print of Cobra. I did not notice that until just now. I was like, what? That's so freaking awesome. And he's basically talking about like how he disabled everything in their body. They feel no pain, no remorse, no emotions. They just take orders. They're like the clones from Star Wars, the Clone Wars. Except they feel remorse, but only thing that they're made for is taking orders. So, they're building up everything to take down the Joes. All of a sudden, later on, we then see a Baroness and how she has this humongous house, and she's talking with her husband, but Storm Shadow is there. So when we see Storm Shadow with a Baroness, he's like, I'm coming with you to get the warheads. We leave at dawn. And then she actually tries to kill him, and we find out that he trained her. So that's why she's so deadly. And then we get a flashback. Now, like with Stephen King's It, this movie does have a lot of flashbacks, but just like in Stephen King's It, they all provide a purpose. And the first flashback is of Anna and Duke before Duke went off. And we see her brother, who is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is awesome in this movie. He plays a great person in this film. So he proposes to her. She says yes. Then we get a montage of training between Duke with Duke and Ripcord, and Duke and Ripcord go through every single thing. Duke has a one-on-one fight thing with Snake Eyes, and we see the guy who played Rick O'Connell from the Mummy movie. Actually, I think this guy did direct the Mummy movies. I think who is the director? That's very embarrassing when I can't remember the director. But they see him, like we see how Duke eventually does get one on Snake Eyes. And after all the training is done, they start building something between Ripcord and Scarlet. Ripcord has a thing for her, but Scarlet, because the way she was raised, or something like that, because she graduated from college when she was 12, and she only believes in things that you can prove that exist scientifically. So he has emotions for her. She says, emotions, in my mind, emotions do not exist because they cannot be explained in science. So then we find out that after that, Duke and Ripcord all pass, and they're a part of G.I. Joe only temporarily. You only get into G.I. Joe if you are asked. So, after that, we get the villain known as... oh crap, what is it? Zartan. And I got addicted to Zartan because all he did was... and he is a master of disguise. When they find the pit, which, by the way, the pit is very hard to get into and to get out of. When they get in there, Storm Shadow and how they get in, they drill through the wall, and Storm Shadow gets a sword, and he does some kind of move, and he kills a security guard, and then they go to General Hawk's room, and they kill a blonde. And this is where we find out that Storm Shadow actually does know mercy. Because Zartan kills the woman, and he's like, oh, that's right. You don't kill women. For you, Zartan, I'd make an exception. That we know right there that he has, at least Storm Shadow has morals, and he will not kill women. So now the objective is to get out of the pit. And this is when we get a big, awesome fight scene. We get a fight scene between Duke and a bunch of the soldiers. We see Heavy Duty take a grenade and stuff it in one of the soldiers' eyes, blows the dude's head up. Scarlet uses a camouflage suit that they shown earlier in the movie, and she unfortunately gets her butt kicked by Baroness. But when Duke is confronted with Anna, he cannot kill her. Even though he has a gun pointed to her head, he's like, look, just give me the case. Give me the case. I will kill you if I have to. But unfortunately, he can't do it, and this is what leads to their escape. Now, I've seen this movie 2 or 3 times in theaters. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is the fights between Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. Storm Shadow cuts Ripcord's gun, and all of a sudden it looks like Ripcord's going to get cut or killed, and then Snake Eyes to the rescue, and then all of a sudden we see flashbacks, and they start fighting like ninjas with their swords and all this stuff, and does this look awesome or not? Does this look appealing? Is this getting annoying yet? And it's just so epically awesome. And they do escape, and then they start recollecting, and they start rebuilding, and we get a flashback of Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes' flashback was my favorite. We see how he became the way he is. He was a kid on the streets in Japan. He found the dojo where he learned karate, and this is where he meets Storm Shadow as a kid. Storm Shadow as a kid is a punk. He is an angry little punk. And like they start fighting, and the master comes in, and he's like, look, he's hungry, he's homeless, we need to invite him in and show him the path. And so this is where he gets his name, because the mentor's like, what should we call you? Snake Eyes. And then after that, McCullen decides he wants to weaponize one of the warheads. So, and because of what the French did to his ancestor, where we get the name Destro, the destroyer of nations. But we do see one of the reasons why Anna is so upset with Duke, and it is because Rex was a smart person, and they needed him to do something in a bunker, and when Duke said, you've got 5 minutes, as soon as Rex went in, the strike team came, and it was already too late, and it looked like Rex was dead. But instead of Duke confronting Anna, he left. And so Anna was heartbroken, and that's one reason why she hates him. So then they decide they find out what they're going to do with the warheads, and they go to Paris. And this is where they use these suits. And this was in the training montage, which I'm sorry I didn't mention. The suits, I can also see why a lot of fans didn't like this idea. Oh, well, G.I. Joe's guns and stuff, and no armored suits that run. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I understand that would be another reason for fans to get upset. So they have this big battle in France, and the first thing to happen, Snake Eyes runs and jumps and chases a freaking a Hummer. And this was an awesome scene. We have Duke and Ripcord running across France trying to catch them. They have the warheads. And Snake Eyes tries to stop them in the Hummer. But all of a sudden we get a fight scene with Snake Eyes on top of the roof and Storm Shadow in the passenger seat. They're doing karate in the seat. It's like, and then Snake Eyes falls under the truck, and Ripcord's like, I'm not Ripcord, Heavy Dude is like, look, you've got to stop them. They're going to use the warhead. It's now or never. So he shoots their brakes, and then he rolls under. And this was one of my friend and I's favorite scenes. Anna looks out, she's like, huh, he gave up. Storm Shadow gets this scared look on his face. He's like, he never gives up. And then they get hit by a train, and somehow they're still alive. So Anna and Storm Shadow split up. Storm Shadow has the warhead. Anna has the kill switch. Storm Shadow shoots it. Duke hits the kill switch, but unfortunately he gets himself captured, and now the mission is for the Joes to go back and to get Duke. And this leads to an awesome, awesome battle. And we find out about what happened with Storm Shadow, why he hates Snake Eyes so much. Because when they were fighting as kids, Storm Shadow got angrier and angrier, but Snake Eyes was always calm. And one time, they had a montage of them fighting with different weapons. Like nunchucks, swords, the things, I don't know what they're called. They look like guns, but they're for your shoulder, or like they're for your forearms. So Snake Eyes gets promoted to first class, or he's the best of his ninja class, and that's why Storm Shadow hates him so much. Storm Shadow killed the Master. Duke puts the trigger back in the warheads, and now it's up to the Joes to get back and save Duke, and it leads to this underwater battle, and all of this that happens. My favorite scene of the movie is when Anna starts to reflect back on Duke, because when the soldiers are beating him, she starts to override the programming, and that's right, she's actually being programmed like an android. And right when we find out who the doctor is Rex. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is Cobra Commander. I did not see this coming at all. I really didn't. We find out what happened. He was in the bunker, and Mindbender closes the door, and even though Rex is badly scarred, he is the doctor, and he hates Duke. And so when McCullen comes in, he has that gun that Anna has. He shoots it. Or, no, he has a flamethrower and he shoots it, but Duke shoots the gun that Anna has, burns his face, so now they escape. And we learn how... I was like, well, what's going to happen with Destro? Who's Destro? Who's Cobra Commander? Destro is James McCullen, because he sticks nanomites in his neck and it gives him the metal face. Cobra Commander... At the end of the movie, he's like, it's time for the Cobra to rise and reveal himself. You may call me Commander. But unfortunately, they do get captured, and this built up to the sequel. Now, with Zartan, he could not do his transforming ability yet. It wasn't until they gave him this test that allowed him to do it. The president goes into his bunker, and all his security men are killed. And then at the end of the movie, we see the president, which it's actually Zartan, snaps his fingers, and he does the whistle. The movie ends. Guys, I strongly recommend. This movie is not on Netflix. The sequel is, and you guys know how much I hate that sequel. But guys, even though that this movie is a good adaptation of the comics. Great character development, great story, great acting, great CG. It's all good. This is a fun time. This was a fun time in the movies. This will definitely be a fun time at home. I strongly suggest that you go and pick it up. So guys, put in the comments below, what is your favorite comic book movie that's not Marvel or DC? This happens to be my favorite. What is yours? I really want to know. Comment below and let me know.